Hey, welcome to More Than Velocity. Today we have a unique one. Today we have Tyler Tortora on, who they started out in baseball, but they've kind of branched into getting a lot more softball clients. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting to answer a lot of those questions that people have been emailing, calling, writing in, texting us what they have about the applications to softball. And they're seeing some really cool results. I know, Tyler, you're going to go over a couple things. I'm not going to hog all the time, but if you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, so we are located in Trumbull, Connecticut. My father has been running the business forever, and now I'm starting to take over a lot of the responsibility, including our ArmCare program, which has just been absolutely amazing for our athletes. Um, Past couple years, we've been using it. A lot of baseball players seeing progress, and those were the first ones that really got to it. Now our softball clients have been really getting into it, and our younger, like uh, early high school and middle school age girls are really showing a lot of benefits from this program.
Yeah, and that's great. And obviously, we don't need to spend too much time on the baseball aspect. There's been a lot of success stories out of there. But what are some of the kind of common threads? How do these softball players start asking about arm care? What are some of those common questions they start doing?
So basically, what we started doing is we had a few high school pitchers that started doing it, and then they started seeing really good results, going like all state, things like that, getting accolades around that. So then we started trying it out with some younger girls going into high school, early high school, and seeing their scores and then seeing how their velocities would increase over the course of time. It just they have improved so much, and now it's like we have so many girls on it. It's like they're just blowing away the boys because they're just having such great results. It's like you can't even compare. So like today I'll be talking about I'll have one report specifically. This girl, she increased from 50 to 55 miles per hour. She's 13, not even in high school yet. And that was in less than a month or just about a month time frame.
So predominantly all strength based changes on that.
Yeah, so strength base, we don't haven't really had any injuries. The throwing mechanics are a lot different with softball, obviously. So like the injury thing is not really a problem. We have a lot more with the baseball where we prevent a lot of injuries. We get our guys' arms feeling a lot better. But with the softball side, it's just that velocity has just been going up
Mhm.
like ridiculous. And obviously you see that strength number showing that as well. So you see the velocity and you're like, all right, that's the on the field stuff. But then the in the facility stuff, the this side of it, we see, okay, they improved this much of their body weight percentage, during these tests.
Got it. So Ryan, do you have any questions or do we want him just to jump
I
right into it?
I wanted to know a little bit about the differences in the metrics between the baseball players and the softball players. Like, do you see different muscular imbalances? Do you see, similar weaknesses? This is such a new territory for us that I'd like to see, what kind of data you're seeing from, these athletes.
What I'm seeing a lot of is that the girls have really, really crazy range of motion. So their range of motions are off the charts, and it's like, whoa, like that's a lot of ER or reflection or whatever. And like the guys sometimes will have good, sometimes it's like nothing almost. They can barely move. So the girls' range of motions are way higher, but their strength, I would say, just about every imbalance I've seen was external rotators were weak compared to internal. I've
Mhm.
almost never seen an internal rotator weak compared to the external. Um, that's the only imbalances side I would see really with this, I would like to say that all those girls that are in that, we've had girls like as young as 10 years old on this now, from
Nice.
10 to 13 range, they're all, once they get to balanced, their charts shoot up. Like you look at their chart and you're like, wow, once we balance them out and they start doing much better, we see the parents and the coaches all the time in the facility and they're like, wow, you could see them, on the field. We have catchers doing it, infielders doing it. They're like, when they throw the ball down to second base, it's way, way faster. Or we have a pitcher and a catcher combination. It's like these two girls, they're like 12 years old and they're with the training and the arm care stuff that they do, they're going to be phenomenal athletes by the time they're in high school.
Here's a quick question I have, and you may cover this in the examples you have on the visuals. So if I am, we'll just jump into those. But I obviously, as Ryan knows, I got into coaching at a high school, and I'm new to working with hitters and all these other things. And the one thing I've seen is as we're increasing that strength, and the range of motion and external rotation and that total strength and the hitting, I've seen exit velos shoot up. So I took some information from one of the groups we partnered with, Top Velocity, on their exit velocities, and I seen that my freshmen are now hitting exit velos off the tees of what juniors are doing. So have you seen that they're starting to hit the ball harder? There's more doubles involved in softball, or have you not looked into that at this point?
We haven't specifically looked for a correlation between the two because it's hard to tell as well because obviously we're not just training them with ArmCare, we're training
Mhm.
them as performance coaches and then using this as an additional tool. So we've kind of just like, all right, well, with the ArmCare results, let's look at how you're throwing, your arm feels and
Mhm.
all that. Um, but I'm sure that I mean these girls are hitting way better. I would assume if I were to talk to how their parents and coaches how their hitting has been, they would say that besides the fact that they're overall way stronger, and then we built them up in those different planes, that they're also faster, so they're getting more doubles or triples.
Mhm.
Well, from something that shouldn't have been that, but I could probably look into that more and see like, okay, how is this now more like you said the strength stronger in the ER? How is that correlating to hitting, not just throwing?
Mhm. Yeah, that'd be something cool. So I got screen share on if you want to go ahead and pull that
Yep,
stuff up. Let's dive into the data because I think that's what everybody's going to be listening for anyways. There we go. We got it.
got it here. All right, so this is the example I'll be using. So this girl, like I said, she's 13. She went from 50 to 55 in around a month time frame. Um, so look at her total strength. I mean, 80, the goal of there, and then her current. You could see all these numbers here. One thing we'll get to towards the end is her. She had an imbalance, and her first test that was obviously corrected over the course of some time, and that's a big feature that I like to look for. Is the first step in doing a program like this is we got to make sure it's safe for you to go out and perform at your best, but then also increase what your best level is. So we want to make sure you can always perform at your best and be there consistently without problem. So we look at her strength velocity ratio. Um, 1.6 is the what we're looking for. So she's 163. That's good. We like to see that. Her miles per hour, she had updated that when she did that test. Her total strength will go down to here. So it's nice. I like this, the benchmark part, because then it kind of tells parents and coaches, okay, well, what do these numbers actually mean? And you get to see, all right, well, if this is where she ranks amongst these three levels over the course of time, seeing that number go up more and more, we'll then be able to see how she's projected to have a future career in this.
Mhm.
So it gives us a better understanding as coaches, as well as parents and performance coaches, but then parents and softball coaches to understand, okay, where do they rank amongst other players? It's not just how do they perform. Um, you can see our chart here. So she was normal for everything in this for these tests that we did. Um, we'll move on to the internal rotation strength, same thing. You can see her benchmarks, her testing, her most recent test, she was slightly down. I like to tell the parents and coaches, don't worry about when you have a test that goes slightly down. You want to look at the big picture over the course of
Mhm.
time that chart continues to progress upwards and that we're keeping keeping the athletes well rested, well recovered, but then also performing at a high level when it comes time to do that. Same thing, external rotation strength. Also, I'll point out if you see here the 24.3 on the external and the 24.5 on the internal, that's probably the closest I've seen someone have it for softball girls at this
Mhm.
age.
That's pretty good
Um,
balance.
yeah, that is very, very close. Same thing, the trend is all normal. Shoulder balance, exactly what I was just mentioning. You're going to see here, now she's kind of off the chart, literally, because she's basically the exact same, zero point 0.2 pounds off for the two directions.
Mhm.
Um, so this is what I was talking about earlier. So she was in the warning when we first did that test. So when I explained that to the parents, I'm like, all right, so look, they're not at the phase yet to where we're going to progress. We want to progress them to, push them with hard workload. We want to correct that imbalance that they have before we do anything. Because if you have any imbalances in any type of movement with any type of training, you're just risking anything bad happening. you don't want to move on until you address any problems in someone's movement skills. Scaption strength, same thing here. I love the benchmarks. I'm really big into data, so whenever we have any like training, so not just the ArmCare, but when we do our sprints, when we do our shuttle runs, our strength tests, depending on the sport and the athlete, I like to compare them to everyone. So we have our in facility leaderboards, but then we also have our data report. So I can take a high school baseball player and I can compare them to an MLB player for certain metrics that we use. And we use a bunch of different technologies in our facility. But then also we like to create competition by um, having those in facility leaderboards, because then you see your friends come in there and you're like, wow, he's just a little bit faster than me at this, with this weight on the bar speed. And it's like, okay, well, now we force those guys to move better. Another thing I'll say is with this program, I believe it was last year, maybe 2 years ago now, we had a minor league player who, over the course of his summer training with us, he increased 10 miles per hour on his throwing. So he was training very consistently, and he was really, really involved in his arm care. He's a pitcher. He learned from being in the minor leagues like how important that stuff was, and
Did you
he
say
went up.
10 miles an hour?
Yeah, 10 miles an hour. Yeah.
Dang.
So he he really did good. He was kind of out of shape when he came back to us, and wasn't really doing good with his diet or anything, but he knew a lot of this stuff. He just wasn't like held accountable. So once he came back and it's like, all right, we got you on the ArmCare, we got you on our training program. Let's work on cleaning up your diet a little bit. And it's like you see his body transform. You see him in there, he's throwing all the time, and just 10 miles per hour. You're like, wow, you go from, I believe it was 84 to 94. And you're like, that's some good progress.
Mm-hmm.
Think that's it for this data here that I'll be looking at for this athlete's profile. But um, this is just one of the girls that I was going to show for today. But we have, like I said, a number of girls that do this program, and this one I just selected because she's in there a lot, and her father's her father's in there and communicates with me a lot about her progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure to touch on that.
Yeah, so I think one of the cool things that you're pointing out is you guys are building the base so you can build on top of that. So the way I always like to say it is you can stack blocks on top of each other and you can build high, but it's not going to be very stable. But if you build that pyramid or that foundation out wide and say you build, a mile wide, you can build a mile up. But if you
Mm-hmm.
build, 2 feet wide, you can probably build about 2 feet up before you start running out of stability there. So what you're seeing, obviously, and you bring up that minor leaguer who gained 10 miles an hour, and you're bringing up this softball athlete who in a 30-day window gained 5 miles an hour. It's because you're setting that foundation. Like you said, you're doing more than just arm care, which is good. Like we are not a standalone system by any stretch. You can run it on your own if you don't have anything, but if you get access to a good coach who uses the system, you're only going to benefit more. And that's where you're building that out. Then you're getting into the sprint speed, you're getting into the nutrition, but none of that stuff matters unless you have the base set. Ryan, do you have any questions on that?
No, I like the data presentation because it's a kind of a first window into seeing for me what a strength profile looks like, for softball. The interesting thing, one of the questions I had for you is that did you try testing or using the strength tester in a softball pitching specific position? Yeah, or did you like because were your pitchers at least were they doing overhead
Are you talking if
like
they're using the
primers?
arm primer now?
Yeah, the
Okay.
primer. Yeah, because it
So,
looks like the other tests. It's interesting because all of
mhm,
these overhand strength qualities you're mentioning are adding to velo. And
mhm,
noticing that the girl is actually a 1.6, which is pretty good
mhm.
to see too, because it's consistent with the baseball level of our metrics.
Yeah, so like we haven't changed like literally anything, right? They've just been doing exactly what like a baseball player would do. So that when they're doing that arm primer, they're doing it that way. They excel and decel. They're not changing it up. maybe I think it would be actually a good idea to kind of build into a feature, that that lower level XL and decel arm primer type thing, from doing that, because seeing the data then from going forward and backwards from that low position, kind of where the release point would be, um, that might be actually very beneficial to see the feedback from that, versus the up here, because they're obviously, if they're a pitcher, they're not throwing from up here. If they're in the field, they will be. But to see that release point for the pitchers, that I think that would be very nice to see.
There are some things, that I've been seeing in softball pitching, like watching the delivery in slow motion. It kind of looks gross in the sense that like
Mm-hmm.
they land with a blocked hip. Like when you have a baseball pitcher, when they're throwing, the hips are generally directed right at home plate.
Mm-hmm.
These girls have a closed pelvis to the sense of like they're slamming everything into their lead side, and the ball, it's interesting because when they go through the turn and they throw, the ball seems that sometimes it's released behind the hip a little bit, or like not like, obviously they're not doing like a bowling action, but
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing to see what happens in terms of stride foot contact, and it's like basically going with your shoulder into a wall,
Yeah.
and it's like I can't believe that this sport has, one, no pitch counts, and like two, like there's no days rest. Like you could pitch a girl the entire weekend, which is like it's insane. Like I would imagine the things that the pitchers must experience because they're going in a windmill action. I would think that there's some bicep tendon, like in
Mm-hmm.
anterior shoulder problems, issues, and then that lead hip. I would assume that they have something going on there. That's got to get just so jammed up if they're not strong.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially like you said, with because they're doing that windmill action, that there's probably a lot of stress built up in here. And then that front hip, yeah, when you're kind of jamming your hip into that position, or when you jam anything into a position like that, it just, it could cause the joint to kind of wear on itself. Um, I haven't heard anything from that, from feedback like on that side from our pitchers at all. So I can maybe start asking those questions to
Mhm.
see like if there is anything, because they may feel it, but they don't know exactly what it is. One thing I did want to say, like you said, the pitch counts. When I'm communicating with these players about, like when we should do tests or when they should be doing their training, it's like, all right, well, I'm throwing Saturday and then I got a game Sunday and then I'm going to a camp Monday and then I'm doing this. It's like, how much are you going to throw? It's like, oh, I have to also throw 5 days a week on top of that. I'm like, geez, I don't know if I want to stress your arm anymore when you're throwing, 200 pitches a week like that, over the course of just a few days. It's like, I can't believe it either. It's like, how much throwing do these girls actually do? And I'm like, let's try to plan this out. I've been trying to gauge like on my own that work capacity of how much they're throwing versus how much that they're doing any of the training when it comes to the ArmCare stuff as well
Mhm.
as the testing. Because
Yeah,
I'm trying to
you
find that
have to monitor
balance.
that, and everyone just assumes in softball there's no stress, but we've had a
No, there's
couple
stress.
softball players on the podcast before, and they're like, "Yeah, they say it doesn't mess you up." They're like, "My arm freaking kills me," you know.
Hmm.
So you got to take care of it. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no, it's for sure. Now baseball players, obviously, it's like, in our facility, we're like, yeah, pitchers are treated obviously way differently than any other athlete because we train all athletes. Um, but with baseball players, you see a lot of the times, I'd like to say, these kids, they throw around like a weighted ball or a plyo ball, and it's like they're always just throwing that, and it's like, all right, cool, you're just stressing your arm out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and then you get an arm injury and you're like, well, why did I get injured? I did all the plyo ball stuff. Well, it's because you didn't actually strengthen
Hmm.
your body to handle that workload. So if you're just constantly pounding your body with a workload your body can't handle, over the course of time, you're going to get an injury. But if you prepare yourself for that workload and then you go and do it, then there's nothing wrong with it. So I always tell people, think of it as just two steps. Preparation, or step one, get your arms, tested, see your imbalances, see your weaknesses, see what you need to work on, correct that, build upon that. And then if you want to go into a weighted ball or plyometric program, then you can do that. But I would suggest doing this first simply because you don't really know what you're doing. I said I can point you in the direction of some good research. I have mixed opinions on it as well. I'm not going to tell someone not to do something or to do something because that's not even so much my part of this. But I would say like, look, there's research out there. You can look at some of it. It's good, it's bad, whatever. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. But I would say first things first, develop your body through these motions and then go out and do something like that.
So I know we're running a little low on time, and one of my big observations is number one, you said something that to me sets your group apart was you need to ensure it's safe for them to compete, and then you can build on top of that. And that's delaying gratification. And from a
Mm-hmm.
baseball lens, there's so much of it. And I deal with the youth athlete a lot more than I used to now. And Ryan, so do you. I mean, we used to just not, we just didn't, we didn't have that lens until recently. And there's so many parents that I talk to. I meet with a parent tomorrow morning, actually going to coffee, that her son plays roughly 115 travel games a year. And they're like, I'm in pain. I don't know. It's like, well, it's because you're 13 and you play 115
Mm-hmm.
games a year. You need to set the foundation and let's cut back on that. Let's build the body. Let's build that base so we can build on top of that base and actually make a good structural foundation. We're going to delay gratification, which your guys' group does. You're delaying gratification so that way you can not have to worry about it later. And then number two, the big thing I got on my third finger here. Number two observation is in this conversation is you guys use a lot of tech, you use a lot of data, you use a lot of information. Ryan and I do that as well. We use a lot of tech, a lot of data. I'm a pitching guy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler. You have a football background,
Yeah, I'm a
which is
football
going to lead
player.
me into
Yep.
my follow up too, which I'm going to put you on the spot, and you don't realize this, but I'm going to force you guys into something. And then Ryan, obviously, you have a huge tech background with it as well. Strength is the gateway drug to development. And what I mean by that is you're not going to be committed to nutrition unless you're committed to strength. You're not going to be committed to patterning or movement profiles unless you're committed to strength. You're not going to be committed to sleeping right unless you're committed to strength. You're not going to be committed to showing up to a game unless you're committed to strength. It's a gateway drug to actually being better. So while it is, to me, it's the foundation and it's not the be all end all, but it is to me the biggest piece of the puzzle that allows you to actually be committed and do those things. You're not going to be committed to, carrying a dynamometer around with you unless you're committed to strength. So, you guys have any quick feedback on that? I know we're running out of time, and then I'm going to put Tyler on the spot before we jump off here in regards to football. But you have anything to fill in on that, Ryan or Tyler?
I got nothing
Yeah.
to fill in. I agree with you totally.
No, I
Okay.
agree, and I'll kind of just expand upon it. So like one thing, like my father has always taught us and our staff and everyone that we train, it's best when we get the athletes at the youth level. So like, sometimes we've had 5-year-olds that come in and it's like they're well behaved, but they could do it. But we like to get them when they're younger because we like to teach them how to move their body. So I use myself as an example because I know myself the best. When I was 6, that's as far back as I remember, we would go around to all the baseball facilities and I would do the warm-ups with them. So I would do that all the time. So almost every day of the week, I'm with my father, we're doing the warm-ups. So I became very good at movement patterns. I started lifting at about 13 years old, and my strength numbers skyrocketed because I had more control over my body. My brother started lifting when he was a little bit later, 15 years old, but his numbers skyrocketed because he had more control over his body. So we like to teach the movement when they're young. If they know how to control the body and that mind muscle connection, building those neural pathways, you teach them like little lifting things, obviously, but nothing crazy. They know how to control the body. They could do anything. They could play any sport as long as, they have the skill for it. And they can build that strength because, all right, you show someone how to do a front squat. They're like, all right, well, I've done this type of motion before. I may not have done this specific exercise, but I've done a squat type motion before
Mhm.
during my training. So you can build upon strength very easily when you have an athlete that's well in touch with their body.
And that's the big thing too, is that activation, that warm up needs to be athletic based. So, moving, squatting, lunging, rotating, all these different things that are building strength in a plane of movement. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
that strength is that foundation. And now I'm going to put you on the spot because I know we're out of time. So you're going to have to start running this with your quarterbacks. And you're going to have to get pre throw velos and post throw velos. and you're going to be the guy who's spearheading this for us because I know you have a lot of quarterbacks. I know your background isn't football, and I see you getting nervous in your chair right now, which is good because you're going to be our
I just
pilot
know I
group
got
for
so much work
quarterbacks.
for me.
You're going to be
Yeah.
our pilot group for quarterbacks, and we're going to go that. We're going to have a follow-up meeting with it. We're going to have a 10-week post. This is the time to get your quarterbacks going too right now. It's late January when we're filming. This isn't going to come out till probably like, February, March, somewhere in there because we have a whole bunch of them in the hopper. So make sure people keep listening to those. But you're going to be our quarterback guy. I'm going to end the recording here so that way you can't say no and everybody knows it's coming out. But thanks
You
for
got it.
listening to More Than Velocity. We had Tyler Tortora. We'll put the link in there on how you guys find their information to make sure you guys can connect with them. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Thank you.